In this assignment, I will be talking about how contemporary issues affect sports. The main issues I will be looking at are violence, gender, drugs, and racism. Violence. Violence in sport is an issue, especially with spectators. For example, it is not a surprise to hear about a fight in the newspaper after a big football match. Just recently there was a fight between Cologne fans and Arsenal fans. Unfortunately, this is a very common occurrence and is not only in football. The cause of this violence can spread from disagreement in the rules to a fan member being racist. This can lead to punishments or limitations for the fans. For example, after the England fans were involved in a large fight with another group of fans, the Russian authorities put an alcohol ban in place so that England fans and other fans were unable to drink before or during matches, as it was proven that heavy drinking caused more violence. The plan was that this would minimise the amount of violence with spectators. Violence is also occasionally seen between players. For example, the recent fight between Joe Marler and James Haskell, as shown in the top right hand corner. On this occasion, the trigger of the fight was due to Joe Marler playing to the limits of the rules, just to aggravate and provoke his opponent James Haskell. This is just one example of how fights can break out in sports. Other examples could be officials making an incorrect or borderline decision and the players strongly disagreeing with this. Another cause could be retaliation to foul play, or finally, rivalry. And violence is also seen occasionally between players. For example, the recent fight between Joe Marler and James Haskell, as shown in the right hand corner. On this occasion, the trigger of the fight was due to Joe Marler playing to the limits of the rules to aggravate and provoke his opponent James Haskell. This is just one example of how fights can break out in sports. Other examples could be officials making an incorrect or borderline decision and the players strongly disagreeing with this. Another cause could be retaliation to foul play or traditional rivalry. Gender. In sports, the level of participation from females is undeniably low compared to male participation. But why is this? It's potentially due to a lack of access. Girls have 1.3 million fewer opportunities to play school sports than boys have. Limited opportunities to play sports in both schools and colleges mean girls have to look for another way to play the sport, which may not be available and may cost. Another aspect could be due to social lives. Due to historical tradition and historic events, males were seen as being superior to females in the past. This means, unfortunately, girls in sports may experience bullying and isolation due to the stereotyping from society. As girls grow up, the quality of their sports experience may decline, as the facilities may not be as good as the boys. Venues and playing times may not be as appropriate. The availability of and quality of trained coaches may be lacking in their communities. All these coaches may be more focused on the boys playing the same sport. An example of how safety can affect female participation would be in rugby. Rugby can be played as a mixed sport until the age of the under-12s. This is primarily due to safety issues, as this tends to be the age when people's bodies start to go through physical changes and develop. And as on average, males are stronger than females, which can potentially create an unfair advantage and put females in danger. Now, this may not seem like a reason that affects female participation, but it is. Only in the last 2 to 3 years, female rugby has become more popular. This means that when females have to start playing single-sex rugby, they don't tend to have enough players to make a full squad, which then means girls stop playing and they drop out of the sports, which leads into a drop in participation. Historically, men were always higher up in the social hierarchy, essentially making them the superior gender. This meant that men were always seen to be doing the physical work and physical activities, whilst the women were expected to stay at home and do housework. Due to this, you had never seen a female performing sports in this time, whereas for men and boys it was perfectly acceptable. This then created a situation where when females started to play sports, it put them into a catch-up situation, permanently trying to catch up to the standard and quality of the male sportsman. Another reason is in certain social groups, it is encouraged and expected for males to participate in sport. As sport is so popular between males, it's almost a language that can be spoken worldwide. For example, you might not be able to understand someone, but the rules of football are the same no matter where in the world you are. Another contributing factor would be media. Media is definitely involved in the population of male sports. This is due to the media shining so much light on male athletes, but next to nothing on female athletes, meaning that people aren't as educated or interested with female sports. This can potentially lead into a lack of funding or sponsorship for these teams, because companies aren't going to sponsor a team that doesn't get any light in the news, as it will be seen as a lost cause. Due to the lack of funding, this means that facilities, equipment and officials cannot be afforded, putting the athletes at a high disadvantage. Drugs. Drugs are used in sport to give people an upper advantage. Some examples of these would be narcotics. These are drugs that help to perform for longer. These might be used by an endurance athlete, such as a long-distance runner. Another example would be anabolic steroids. These stimulate muscle growth, speed up recovery, and increase mass. An example of this would be drostanolone, which would usually be used by power athletes, such as a powerlifter. Some athletes believe that performance-enhancing drugs should be legalized in sports, as they feel drugs are taking sports to the next level and is making the athletes the best they can possibly be. The downside to this is that drugs are very dangerous. An incorrect dosage or mixing drugs can create sickness and possibly death. Drugs put certain athletes at a disadvantage, as they might not have accessible areas to get these drugs, or the facilities used to develop or create these drugs may not be available. This makes it almost impossible for these athletes to perform better than the athletes using performance-enhancing drugs. Athletes in sport may face a situation where they are being bullied and feel ganged up on. This is very often linked to racism. Racism is often used by performers, for example, when Joe Marler called Samson Lee a gypsy boy. But it is also commonly seen between spectators. Many think that racism is something of the past now, but sadly it still remains in the sports. Racism occurs in both team and individual sports around the world, which has led to a wide range of controversial incidents that are mostly reported in the media. The main culprits are the people that participate in the playing, organisation and spectation of sports. But there will be no sport without people from the society, so it is not a simple case of banning the racist parties. Members of public have been fined in the past, and in some cases, if they are season ticket holders, the clubs that they are associated with have banned them. These are just forms of punishment to try and narrow down racism.